Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. All praise due to Allah, and may Allah's peace and blessings be on the last messenger of Allah. Now, we will continue to look at the material which we refer to as general dawah issues. We had three more subjects remaining, which we'll cover now. The first being the last of the women issues. That is that two women are equal to one man with regards to giving witness. This is often raised, as an issue. We should point out, yes, that in the Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah, it does state there, get two of your men as witnesses, but if two men are not available, then get a man and two women agreeable to you as witnesses, so that if one of them makes a mistake, the other can remind her. Allah has explained why He has prescribed two female witnesses to replace one male, so that if one of them makes a mistake, the other can remind her. So this is taking into account the roles of males and females. Take into account the roles of males and females. That females, generally speaking, are responsible for the home, looking after the home, raising the children, preparing the food, cleaning, etc., things which are related to the home. And the males are responsible for working outside the home. They're the ones that are responsible to set up businesses, etc., etc. So, as a whole, men will be familiar with business dealings, monies which are owed and monies which are to be paid, calculations, etc. They're familiar with numbers and the things connected to numbers and business. So if they are to witness something, a business contract, then the likelihood of them remembering the details of the contract will be greater than a woman who is not normally involved in this. So it's just taking into account that norm. Now, in a world today, especially in the Western world, where women have now entered the work place, where they have become business women like businessmen and are involved in the similar things that men are involved in, this is, under that circumstance, then it might appear strange, or one may say, well, why isn't the woman just as capable to deal with numbers and things as the men? But we have to remember that that is an abnormal circumstance. That is not a norm. That is not the state of the world. That is the state of an element, a portion of the world. And that state came about because of historical reasons, because of World War I and World War II. In World War I and World War II, because huge numbers of men were sent to fight in Europe, women were required to go in to keep the factories running. This was an abnormal circumstance. Women were forced into that role. After World War I, most of them went back to their homes, but some stayed in the workplace. When World War II came, more went out into the workplace again. And after World War II, they were encouraged to stay in the workplace by the industrialists, because they were then used to lower the wages for the men. You see, this was now an economic ploy, right? On one hand, they were thinking, well, we're able now to earn some money and to do some things for ourselves and make our own decisions. So this idea was encouraged amongst them. And at the same time, the industrialists, they were thinking in terms of the workforce. Unemployment is important for maintaining work wages at a level which the industrialists can make their maximum profits. So if you only have a male workforce and enough jobs for the males, they, through their unions, can demand any wage. But now when you bring the women in, so you've doubled up your workforce. So if the men don't want to work, well, we can have the women working. So the man, you don't work, you're out of a job. Unemployment. And if you're faced with unemployment, you're more willing to make a deal and say, okay, I will take less. You see? So that was an economic move. And this is not the norm. This is what took place, what evolved. So the situation of the Western woman who is out there in the workforce like men, this is an abnormality. And this is even in America, for example. It's not all the way across America. It's in the big cities, certain centers. If you go into the countryside, which is much of America, the women are in the homes and the men are out working. So this situation, as we said, is an abnormal situation. It is not the norm. So when we are going to look at this command in the Quran, we have to look at it in the context of the norm for human families. Right? So the purpose, as we said, was basically to help women who may forget, due to the fact that they're not dealing normally with the business affairs, remember whatever the deal was. Men were not required to do that because of the fact that they were experienced in that field. Now, there is something else concerning women too that they have noted, that women tend to be accommodating. They tend to be accommodating. Men tend to be more rigid in their positions. There was a show on television called Candid Camera. I'm sure you probably heard of it or whatever, Candid Camera. And they did an experiment, right? I mean, it was for the show. They had a person point to a building in the distance and ask people how high they thought this building was, right? They would ask women, say the building was 700 feet high. They would ask a woman, passerby who would come by, they would ask, how tall do you think this building is? She would look at it and she would say, maybe around 700, 800 feet. And he would say to her, are you sure? Isn't it closer to about 300 feet? And she would say, well, maybe it's around 5, Well, are you sure it's not closer to 2 to 300? She said, yeah, maybe 4. And after saying it, she would end up coming down to 300, agreeing with him, right? That women not wanting conflict, right? Preferring to accommodate what was, a more, you could say, acceptable opinion to the other person. That is the nature of women, to accommodate, right? When they ask the same thing with men, the man would say, I think it's about 800, for example. They say, are you sure it's not 5 or 4? He would say, no, it's 8. Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure? Maybe it's closer to 3. He would say, no, it's 8. He would stick on his opinion. He wouldn't change it, They found they did this with a number of people, and it was just consistently the response. This was a consistent response. And that goes back again to the nature of the women. That a woman, for example, may have an idea in terms of what the contract actually was, but somebody else can tell her, well, maybe it really wasn't that. Maybe it was something else, and she might accommodate. You see? So at least with two women, they're going to support each other, on that point, who have witnessed it, right? The other point to note is that, as a clarification that this is only in the area of male expertise, in the case of breastfeeding, where a woman gives witness that she has breastfed a man and his wife, she is a single witness, that is enough to nullify their marriage. Her single witness is enough to nullify their marriage. So it is not across the board. Every time you need 2 female witnesses to equal 1 male. No. In that area, because she is the expert. Who knows best who breastfed these people? So if she gives that witness as 1 witness, that is enough to end their marriage. And it happened in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. One of the companions had asked the Prophet ﷺ what should he do, because this woman had come and said that she had breastfed both he and his wife. And the Prophet ﷺ's response was, Kayfa wa qad qeel. How can you ask when it has already been stated? Her witness was sufficient. The other topic which is commonly raised in the West, of course, here it comes in a different format. The format here is, why do Muslims take the lives of animals? In the West is, why are Muslims so bloodthirsty that they like to cut the necks of animals? Because of course they're eating animals too. So the issue is not about eating animals, but how you kill those animals. They see Muslims every time Eid al-Adha comes along, gathering up all these sheep and goats and, cutting their necks with these knives. They say, what is this? Blood all over the place, like Muslims are like bloodthirsty kind of individuals, This fits in with the image of the terrorist, and of course those guys in Iraq are only feeding the same the same beliefs. They're cutting people's heads off and all these kinds of things. So they raise this issue that the way that we kill animals is so cruel and harsh. So in terms of their argument, one can point out that in fact Western methods, which are supposed to be more humane, right? They're supposed to be more humane. These methods are in fact far more painful, far more inhumane, because they, in most cases, they will either electrocute the animal or club the animal into unconsciousness. Right? This is their main 2 methods, electrocution and clubbing. Right? For smaller animals like chickens, they dip their feet in waters. They put them in conveyor belts with their feet hanging down. And then they dip them all in water. They electrocute the water. They're all zapped at the same time. And then they take them along and cut their heads off. Right? So they say they're unconscious when we're cutting off their heads. So they don't feel anything. But we say to them, you had to electrocute them to make them unconscious. Is electrocution a pleasant experience? No. It's a very painful experience. Anybody who has been electrocuted, knows it is not something that you would wish for anybody. And even the people who are against the death penalty, they fight against the electric chair because they consider it to be cruel and unjust punishment. Similarly, what they do for the bigger animals is they have what they call stun guns, right? Guns which have a piston. Instead of a bullet coming out, there's a piston which comes out and it's spring-loaded, so it comes back inside of the gun, so you can use it repeatedly. But that piston comes out, it hits the animal on the side of the head, and the animal goes unconscious, and then they cut the head. But this is like somebody taking a cricket bat, right? A cricket bat. It's good and heavy, good and strong. And somebody whacks you over the head with it, you go unconscious, okay, then they cut your neck. Well, is that really painless? No. Being hit in the head by a cricket bat is something very painful. Hard enough for you to become unconscious. So we say it is not a painless process at all. In fact, you inflict much more pain on the animals than we do. When we cut the animal's neck, it's cut with a sharp knife, so they can't even feel it. and the spinal cord is not cut. We only cut the jugular vein and the esophagus. So the animal doesn't even realize that it has been cut. It bleeds naturally. Blood stops going to the brain, so it goes into a state of unconscious naturally, and it dies, calmly. The body may jerk, but that's a natural reaction of the body. It has nothing to do with pain. And there have been tests done by doctors in Germany where they have placed electrodes, on the chest, etc. area or heart area of animals, and killed them according to the Islamic method, cutting the neck. And they've demonstrated that there is no change, no big change in the heart rate of the animal when it is killed like that. Where, of course, when it is done through electrocution, there's a huge jump indicating pain. Now, for your circumstances here, where others, people who are vegetarians, etc., may argue that taking the life of an animal, period, this is not good. This is inhumanity, man's inhumanity to these other creatures. Well, we say that God has submitted the creatures to us, the animal kingdom as well as the vegetable kingdom. If we were not meant to eat animal meat, then God would not have given us teeth to eat them with. We would only have had the grinding teeth at the back. Like vegetarian animals, they only have the grinding type teeth. They don't have incisors, which is for cutting meat. So we would have been created that way. The very fact that we were created capable not only to eat the meat but to digest it. Because again, vegetarians don't have the enzymes to digest animal matter, right? And carnivores don't have the enzymes to digest vegetable matter. But we have enzymes for both. So why did God create us with these if it is not to be used? Question. Furthermore, we can point out to them that the animal kingdom, okay, you want to spare the animal kingdom. What about the vegetable kingdom? Is it not also life? Because they're saying we're taking a life. When you kill the animal, you take a life. We say, when you cut down a tree, are you not taking a life? Isn't it not living? Yes, it's living. So, following your line of reasoning, if you don't want to take any lives, then it means we will have to die. You can't live. Because you must cut down trees and take some lives for you to live. It's just that you have considered vegetable life okay to take, but animal life is not okay to take. That's what it comes down to, And this is due to a philosophy that you hold, that through reincarnation, maybe eating that goat or that sheep, you might be eating grandpa, right? That might be granddad that you're eating there, right? Because that has to do with your belief, But if we were to look at things logically and reasonably, then logic and reason points to taking animal life, no different really from taking plant life. And we have been created with a means to consume these vegetable as well as animal products, enzymes as well as the teeth. So God did not do that without reason and purpose. So we reject that argument. The other point, which is commonly raised, is that Islam was spread by the sword. Islam was spread by the sword. And this has been used to justify the tearing down of Muslims' mosques and attempts to reconvert Muslims to other religions. Yes, it is true that probably the largest or a large quantity of Muslims, a large number of Muslims, did convert from other religions in India here, as well as India, Pakistan, as well as in the Middle East. Most of those who became Muslims in Palestine, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Turkey, these were all Christian areas. Egypt also, North Africa, Algeria, Libya, Tunisia, these were all Christian areas, part of the Roman Empire. So they did convert. But the point is that history has not shown that they were forced to convert. History does not support that claim. The reality is that people became Muslims, chose to become Muslims over a period of time. Muslims ruled Spain for 700 years. If they were forcing people to convert, there would not have remained a single Christian in Spain by the 15th century when Ferdinand and Isabella came back and took over. But factually speaking, there were many. In fact, the majority of the population remained Christian. They didn't force them to become Muslims. Similarly, if Muslims were forcing Hindus to become Muslims in India after 1,000 years of rule, Muslim rule, there wouldn't have remained a single Hindu in India if they were forcing them. It's not to say that maybe some forcing didn't happen in some place, somewhere, sometime. You know, individual incidents may have happened. Yes, we can't deny. But as a norm, that's what we're looking at. Was that the norm? That's not true at all. We find, for example, that Islam spread in Indonesia without any military intervention. There was no war, no battles, no soldiers involved. Islam spread throughout Indonesia, which became the largest Muslim country on the face of the earth, without any military confrontation at all. Much of West Africa, when we look at Ghana, Nigeria, these countries which are majority Muslim countries now, Niger and Senegal, all this, these were not, they didn't become Muslims through wars, they came through trade. Through trade. And this is the same thing which happened in Indonesia. Most of it was through trade. That people in those areas, Muslim or people from Arabia, had been trading with them for centuries. It is not that Islam came and all of a sudden people spread out from Arabia and went to Indonesia and started converting people. No. Trade had been going on between Yemen, Hadramaut, and Indonesia, Malaysia for generations, all the way even with China, for generations. What happened was that when those traders became Muslims and they were now bound by Islamic rules, their mode or method of trade changed. We know in trade that for you to be a successful businessman, basically you trick your customers. That's what you do. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, "At-tujjar humul fujjar." The traders are corrupt. One of the most corrupt elements of the society. Because trade breeds corruption, you know, unless people are particularly careful. So the successful, those successful traders, those who are highly successful, they are that way because they deceive their customers, either by selling them an inferior product for a superior price. Right? That is one of the common methods, right? You know, or by fooling them into thinking that what they're buying something which they're not actually buying. You know, there's different levels of deception. The highest level is where you trick somebody, they buy thinking they're buying something which turns out not to be that thing at all. Right? Or they do it by hoarding, you know, necessities where people have basic necessities that they need. They hoard until the prices go up and then they release it on the market. You know, and this is why Islam prohibits hoarding, because it's exploitation of people's needs. So what happened is that these traders, who prior to Islam, they were using the standard, deceptive trading techniques. After becoming Muslims and being prohibited from these methods, now they came to trade with a different attitude. When they were trading their cloth or whatever, they would tell them, this is not good quality, this is a better quality. Or if you're looking for so-and-so, you can find it with such and such a person, The people were shocked. Why would you tell us? You never used to tell us before, It's your loss, because obviously I'm not going to buy it from you if you've told me that there's a defect in it, right? So, technically speaking, it exposed them to loss. It means that their profits would be less. It doesn't mean they would not still be able to make profits, but their profits would be less. They would be more moderate, right? So, those people, after seeing Muslims consistently doing this, traders, they would ask them, well, why? What would make you want to do this? And then they explained to them that this is our religion. And of course, then they wanted to know, well, what kind of religion is this? And as they learned about the religion, then they converted to the religion. And this is what had that impact on the people. Because nobody else was doing that. Nobody else traded in that way. So, and that's where the same thing for Muslims today, unfortunately, we have joined in the rest of the world in their deceptive practices. You see, if Muslims were to manufacture a car, for example, you look at, say, how car manufacturers function. What do? They build parts in the car which they know will break down. They test the parts, right? They test parts. They have machines which will test the part. If it is a part which is going up and down, they have a machine which will take it up and down, up and down, up and down, and they'll know how many times it goes up and down, for how long it will go up and down before it falls apart. So they give you a warranty for the car, which lasts up until that part falls apart. Then after that, you're not covered by the warranty. You now have to go and buy the spare part from yourself. And what do? They charge you more for the spare part than when you buy the car. See, if you were to take a given car apart, take it all into pieces, and sell the individual pieces, that would add up to 5 to 10 times the value of the car itself. This is how they operate. They get you with the spare parts. They put in parts which, if they wanted to, they could put that part which lasts 10 years, but they will deliberately make one out of plastic instead of out of metal, right? Which so it will break down after 3 years. They deliberately do it. So this is deception. This is deception. They're entrapment. So if you were a Muslim car maker, true Muslim car maker, you would not join in them with this. You would make a car which will last as long as possible based on putting in the best parts. And of course, people who are, you could say, accustomed to changing models every 2 or 3 years, buying new cars, they're not going to be attracted with your car because it's not going to change, right? You're not going to be trying to change it up, because this is part of the deception, isn't it? Changing models. So you would make a good, solid car which will do the job, which doesn't need to be replaced for 20 years, 25 years. You will not be able to make the profits of those who are building cars with what they call built-in obsolescence, which will break down every 3 years, so you have to buy a new car, So you will not be able to compete with them. But you can still sell a product which people who value a good, solid product, they will buy it. Who don't want to be changing cars every 3 years, every 2 years, So there is a market there. And that's how Muslims would make their mark. I'm just giving you an example of cars. It could be in all of the fields. Because of the fact that we are net consumers, we can't even think about that. We just consume. We can't compete with the world market. We could actually, but we choose not to. Because we have been enamored by, through the media, the Western lifestyle with all of the things that comes with it. So we can only be consumers and not producers. But if we were to wake up and change our approach, then that would become in and of itself a powerful means of da'wah. Because people would respect that. There are people who would respect that. Look at, this is very honest. They're giving you a product which is reliable. You can trust it. These people are true to their word. And that's what Muslims were known for. Today, unfortunately, in many of the countries that I've visited where there are Muslim minorities, etc., they're known as crooks. Muslims are known as crooks. They're involved in all kinds of shady deals, paying off this one and that one and importing things that they shouldn't be importing. And, it's all this kind of shady stuff going on. And I'm sure you're familiar with it. I don't have to talk about it here in India, But Muslims are known for that. It's a shame. It's the total opposite of what we're supposed to be known for. So, in general, as we said, if we look at the state of the world, the vast majority of people who came to Islam did not come in by the sword. They have come in through conviction, through having seen what Islam has to offer and being convinced that it is a better way of life. So that basically covers the general topics, the general issues. If there are any questions that anybody would like to raise concerning it before we go on to our next section, which is tips for da'wah, we can take a couple of questions right now. And let me apologize for our late start. I made a big point about starting on time yesterday, but unfortunately things were out of my hands. I told people I want to be here by 11:15. I went for taping some programs for television, satellite television, and I told those people I want to be back here by 11:15. And they promised to have me back here by 11:15, but unfortunately they had me back here by 11:30. So I apologize from my side, but it was really out of my hands. Anyway, inshallah, hopefully tomorrow I have learned my lesson today and we'll be able to start on time tomorrow. I will not make any other arrangements prior to our class. Are there any questions anybody would like to ask before we go on then?
Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. I remember I mentioned that we don't need to be saying the salam alaikum each and every time.
First time, that's why.
Okay.
Yesterday you mentioned about person who has been called. Put yourself other person's shoes. If I want to discuss with Christian persons, if I want to mention about Allah and all, Allah said so, Allah said so. Instead of that, have I to mention God said so? Something like that? See, Allah said in the Quran or in the Holy Book. If I want to mention to a Christian, have I to tell God told in His Holy Book, this is the thing?
Yes, it's better in talking to others who don't know that Allah is God, the same God they believe in, but with a difference. Right? If they don't know that, then it's better to use God, which they're familiar with, so they can find a common ground for our presentation and discussion.
That means I'm not making any mistake by mentioning God. God is, it's not the thing like Allah. It's not a peculiar. It's not a. It's Allah is peculiar. God means it mentioned female God, goddess, or single God, plural, something like that.
This is not an issue.
Okay.
This is not an issue. Actually, the name Ilah in Arabic means God. Al-Ilah is one of God's names, one of Allah's names, and it means God. And Al-Ilah can be Ilaha, a female god. Aliha, many gods. Just as we have in English, God, goddess, etc. So that word already exists in Arabic. The title God is among the names which is applied actually, at least in translation, to God, to Allah.
Okay, one more question, brother, about the clear communication to the brother whom I am approaching. You see, first time I approach here. The second time somebody is putting water, like what you said. Somebody is, trimming it, and later on the man who is getting the fruit. Who will get the benefit from Allah? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Okay, brother's question, since we know that inviting people to Islam may involve many people, a person becomes a Muslim not usually as a result of a single person inviting them, but a number of people inviting, number of people playing a part and a role in it. The brother's question is, who then gets the reward? The point is that the Prophet ﷺ said, Ad-dal al-khair kafa'ili. The one who guides others to good gets the reward of the good that person does. So everybody who is involved in pointing that person shares in the reward. Everybody. Alhamdulillah. Question from the sisters?
Yes, brother. Some of our friends say that when you Muslim women cover up so completely, that's when it ignites the men's mind to find out more about what is actually inside. That is, they're very curious to know what exactly they are covering up. So they say that in turn attracts more attention than your actual objective of covering up.
Okay, we say that if that were the case, then in the bars and the discos, we would have women dancing in full veils, since that is more exciting to the men and etc. But that's not what we have. That's just a theory, which is not real. A woman might say that to you, but you go ask a man which is most inviting and exciting to him. A woman who's covered up like a nun or a woman in a bikini? When they want to sell cars, right? When they want to sell cars, and we know the normal pattern is you want to sell a car, you don't tell about how powerful the car's engine is, how big its wheels are and everything. They just put that car, a red car, with a woman lying on top, right? That's how they sell the car. Now, why don't they put the woman in a full veil, since it's more, curious and make people more attractive? No, they'll put the woman in a bikini. Why? So, you see, that a woman might say that, but reality of any man, we do a survey of the men, non-Muslim or Muslim, they will unanimously tell you that a woman in a bikini is far more attractive to them, meaning which will incite their hormones and their desires, than a woman who is covered from head to toe. That is without a doubt. So that argument is a false argument.
Brother, this is, regarding was Islam spread by sword, if you look at the history of Islam, when the Sahabas went to non-Muslim land, they wrote the letter, either pay the tax to the non-Muslim, that is jizya, or be ready for the jihad. Jizya,
okay.
Jizya or jihad. Mm-hmm. They wrote the letters to their kings. So does that mean that was Islam spread by sword?
Brother's question concerning jizya or jihad, this is not evidence of Islam being spread by the sword, because the people had the option of paying jizya. So obviously it was not a one-way. It's either when it was Islam or the sword, then we can say, yeah, we're forcing people here. Islam or the sword. That's the image that they normally put of Islam spread, right? The Arab Bedouin riding in off the desert, right, with his gutra flying in the air. He's got a Quran in one hand and a sword in the other hand, and this is, that is the image, yes. But if you're saying jizya or jihad, no, you're giving them an option. Pay the jizya, and we will not fight you, right? So, that is not evidence of compulsion in terms of religion. From the sisters.
This is not directly to do with the Dawa workshop, but one of the topics that we discussed, and it's regarding trade and business. Here in India, when one wants to start a business, say for example any food product, probably squashes or pickles, some small scale industry, we require various licenses like FPO license and the SSI license and so many other licenses. And for all of this, when you go to get this license, they ask you to pay a bribe. And they tell you directly, probably the inspectors themselves who are in charge of the license, they tell you directly, you've got to pay me the bribe. And if you don't pay it, we will cause difficulties to you, we will not give you the license and things like that.
Okay.
So how does a...
Okay. Bribery, rishwa, is something forbidden in Islam. Bribery is forbidden in Islam. To pay it or to receive it, right, is a general principle. But we have to understand what is the definition of bribery. Bribery is paying money or wealth or giving some product in order to get a right which was not yours. This is bribery, right? People are standing in a line. There's a guard to make sure everybody stays in the line. You've come at the end, you pay the bribe, you give the guard some money, he puts you at the front of the line. Now, it wasn't your right to be at the front of the line. So, that is bribery. You have paid money to get a right which was not yours. Now, somebody who says, give me money to get your right, he is involved in bribery because he is receiving money for something he has no right to. Right? Because remember, for rishwa, the bribery, it's two ends. One, you are paying to get a right which is not yours. The other one is giving a right for money which is not his to give. Okay? So, your end, when you are paying money to get what is your right, that is not rishwa. That is not bribery. On his end, receiving, yes, that is bribery. He is getting money to give a right which was not his to give. Do we understand that? Is that clear? Okay? So that's an important distinction, and it saves people a lot of problems, because some people not understanding this, thinking that even if you're paying for your own right, you can't do it. So you'll find people who want to go on Hajj in some places. You have to pay these people off to get your right to go on Hajj. And it is your right. But they won't give you a visa unless you pay them some money. So what do? You pay the money. If that's what you're forced to do. So rishwa or bribery, which is prohibited in Islam, is paying money to gain a right which is not yours. Or receiving money to give a right which is not yours to give. Extortion, yeah. We need to go ahead, okay? Can you save that? Sure. Okay, our next topic is tips for da'wah. Tips for da'wah. And I hope at some point before we finish off this afternoon, you will get the notes in your hands. But these notes were given, at least 2 days before the course started. And it should have been in your hands, so please don't complain to me, complain to the organizers. Right? Anyway, tips for beginning da'wah. How do we start off? We have knowledge, we have information, but we don't know how to get the ball rolling, how to get a discussion happening so we can try to introduce Islam to others. We said that the best approach in general is to probe. Remember the PAR principle? We probe the individual. find out what that person is thinking. Listen before you speak. So if we apply the probe principle, the PAR principle, and the listen before you speak principle, it means find out from them what they know or think about Islam. Let them tell you, rather than you feeling, I have to now go tell them about Islam, okay? Okay, you've been in contact with Muslims for so many years, you've been around Muslims, etc., etc. You know, what's your impression of Islam? What do you think about Muslims, the religion of Islam? So you ask them to share with you their views, and people will be more willing to do that. Again, if it's on a one-on-one basis, we try to get them one-on-one, right? Where they don't, because you've built a friendship. Remember, we also try to build some links first. Because if you meet a person for the first time, for you to ask them, what do you know about Islam? What do you think? You know, you have not built a relationship for them to feel comfortable to express it to you, right? So it is somebody who you've already built a relationship with. There's a friendship. So they feel in private, they could express to you their views. Because in public, maybe they will say things they're afraid others will hear it and not like it, and it will create problems. So you have built that relationship, you will find, inshallah, that they would be willing to share their views. And then, of course, they would have naturally a lot of misconceptions. So then you just let them say what they have to say first. Don't cut them off again, because again, sometimes we're too keen to get the message across. So the person tells us one thing, we're cutting them off. No, it's not that. It's not, you know, next thing, no, it's not that. No, let them say what they have to say. Just try to remember what they're saying, all the points, and after they've felt free to talk, and encourage them to speak more. Then when they're finished, then you come back and start to see, well, actually, what you were thinking about this is not really quite what it is. It's not. It's like, for example, I was traveling to the UK from Canada, and this Hindu was sitting next to me on the plane. He had been born in the UK, grew up in the UK, and he had Muslim friends and that. But he said to me, because we just got talking, and he realized that I was Canadian, a convert, a Muslim. You could see I was Muslim, whatever, but I was coming from a Western background, so it meant that I would not be so rigid, right? He felt, he said, could I ask you a question? I said, no problem. He said, I've been wanting to ask this question, all the time when I was growing up, but I was too shy to ask my Muslim friends, right? So I said, no problem, you can ask any question. He said, yeah, I feel, you're more open and like this, I said, yeah. So go ahead, what is it? So he said, my mother used to tell me when I was growing up that inside of the Kaaba of Muslims, right, that you keep Shiva Lingam. You've got Shiva Lingam inside there, and actually that's what the Muslims are worshipping. I just started laughing. I couldn't stop laughing, right? He was laughing along with me too, right? No problem. Then I went on to explain to him that, no, this is not the case. We don't have Shiva Lingam in the Kaaba. It's not true, right? But he was too shy to ask any other Muslim, who was born a Muslim, because he felt that might have been offensive to them, so he wouldn't ask. But me, he felt comfortable with, because I was of a Western background, So I'm saying that making a person feel comfortable to express their views is very, very important. If you want to be able to generate some kind of discussion so you can clarify and explain to people, really what Islam teaches, what its practices and beliefs are, and they mean. Okay? So that first method, we say, is basically applying our listen before you speak, PAR principle, find out what the person actually is thinking. Don't assume, and you're stuck, you don't know how to start. Let them tell you what they think, what they've heard, what they've read about, what they've seen. Of course, there's going to be a lot of distortion, we said, and you have to be prepared to hear anything, right? You can't, when they say something, you can't make your face, you have to keep a pleasant face and let them say whatever they have to say, because you have to remember that it's not necessarily an intent to offend you, but only to convey to you what they heard and what they, thought. The second method is what we could call the current issue method. That you take some current issue which is in the news that people are talking about or whatever, and try to introduce that as a means for conversation, Whether it is the hijab, for example, hijab in France, where they're prohibiting women from wearing that or whatever, or it is the war in Iraq, what is going on there, either the slaughtering of people there, or even the Iraqis, what happened to them in the Abu Ghurab prison and etc. Use current issues for a basis for discussion, because people may be more not wanting to talk about religion, really. The current issues tend to be, we could say, above religion. I mean, though it may involve some religious issues, it's it's something that it's in the news, everybody's aware about it, so people will tend to be more willing to talk about current issues, current news. So you'll be able to give them the other side of the picture. They've already been inundated with false information through the media, about Muslims. So you try to clarify the other side, that you point out to them, for example, that whenever somebody with an Arabic name commits a crime or what may be called a terrorist act, it is a Muslim terrorist, a Muslim robber, a Muslim whatever. But whenever other people do it, it's just a terrorist, just a robber, this is a common thing which happens in the media. And people are not necessarily aware of it, but until you point it out to them, say, yeah, come to think of it, that's true. Always the Muslim adjective is added, whenever it is somebody who is Arab or whatever. And in Palestine, for example, the PLO organization, which was the well-known, terrorist, so-called terrorist organization, the PLO members are not all Muslims. Many of them are atheists. Many of them are Christians. Even the current head of the PLO, this Mahmoud Abbas, he's a Baha'i. That's the PLO. And that's why they will never succeed. The Islamic goal, the goal of an Islamic state, they will never happen with them. Because it's a mixture. It's not about Islam, really. It's just about politics. So you can clarify that. So we use, as we said, issues, current issues, whether it is the so-called weapons of mass destruction issue, which never showed up in Iraq, on the part of the Iraqis. Yes, there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq used by the Americans. They were the ones using the weapons of mass destruction, right? And of course, recent revelations that have happened in America point out that they knew ahead of time that there weren't any, that this was just all a setup. So, current issues. The third that you might use, this depends on where people are, the location, etc. People who are not from that location who are visiting. This is good for visitors. Somebody who is coming from outside of India and visiting Muslim areas, they've been amongst Muslims and so on. So then you can ask them about, how it feels, what is your experience of being amongst Muslims. Not necessarily asking about Islam, etc., but what it feels to be in the Muslim community. How do they find it different from, back home, or etc., etc. So we can use that for people who are like tourists, people of that type of background, people from other parts of the country who end up living amongst Muslims or spending time amongst Muslims. So that can be a basis for discussion. Actually, for those of us living in Muslim countries where the non-Muslims are a minority and are visitors, then this is a major means. In your situation here, of course, when we talk about tips of dawah, I mean, they have to be looked at relative to your own situation. Because what may be effective in one place may not be that effective in another place in the end, right?